All right, good morning, BSSE II, and welcome to our session 2 or online sync 2 for World History 2. Before I forget, again, no, for those na dili maka-attend karon, just tell your classmates that our recording will be uploaded sa YouTube. Okay, so they can check and watch out whatever might happen and transpire to our discussion today. At least it would help them. Okay. Sige. Now, our discussion for today is basically just the continuation of what we started from World History 1. Okay? So let me share my screen so I can present to you the slides. Okay, so let me share this one. Now, our discussion for today is most likely interactive. Okay, so I'll be asking questions and then you will just share anything that you learned from your readings from the module that I provided. So again, in continuation from what we started from World History 1 in Term 1. So we basically discussed in World History 1 from ancient period to medieval period, and now we are entering towards the middle to end of the Renaissance, and part of the production ng Renaissance is the introduction of Industrial Revolution, because we are into the Enlightenment period where everybody gets the idea that knowledge is not basically just based on religion anymore, but this has transcended from what the church has taught entire Europe, and then it transcended from what are the discoveries of the scholars of that time. No, getting away from the idea of church is not really heretic, but it's just a way of trying to find solutions to existing problems that has not been or had not been solved because of the limitations that the church has given. Okay. So again, now let's talk about Industrial Revolution and nationalism. So here's the content to be delivered. Industrial Revolution and its impact, reaction and revolution, the growth of nationalism, cultural life, Romanticism and Realism in the Western world. So intended learning outcomes, we have to describe and explain the birth of Industrial Revolution and its impact. Discuss and explain the growth of nationalism or Western nationalism, and analyze the Romanticism and Realism in the Western world. So these are the things that we will be delivering today. Again, I'll be asking questions, so I suppose they have read, and have a little bit of background from the study of this discussion. Okay. So again, first is, what is Industrial Revolution? So anybody from the class, from what you have read and understood from the readings that I provided, what is Industrial Revolution? And how this kind of revolution separates from other revolutions that you have read or that you know. Sige daw, let me ask somebody from the class. Sige, Miss Pagios. Miss Pagios? Are you there, Miss Pagios?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Okay, good morning, Miss Pagios. Again, what do you know about Industrial Revolution? And what is the difference between this kind of revolution to the other revolutions that you know?
Well, for me, it's industrial revolution. It's a development in terms of agriculture or this time is nag-arose ang rural urban and of course diri na develop ang mga new machines nga maka-help to improve na mas mo-improve pa ang people and so do the environment. Mara to, sir.
Okay, thank you, Miss Pagios, for that sharing. What else? Let's have Miss Renesis. Glyzel.
No, sir, answer your question, sir.
The question is, what is industrial revolution for you, and how this
Ah,
revolution separates from other revolutions you know?
ano, sir, is during Industrial Revolution, this kanang ka na era, sir, or at the moment is ang mga agrarian societies in Europe na turn na into industrialized
Mhm.
industrialized or into urbanized kaya na. And then um there is kanang production in large quantities na gani
Okay.
through the use of machines and
Mhm.
factories, and through thanks ana mas napadali ug mas na improvement moy
Mm.
moy ka ana, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you are actually correct. Both of you are actually correct on the development from the feudal system of economy at that time, where basically most of the production comes from agriculture, shifted to urbanization, brought by the invention, just like what Ms. Pagyo said, no? Because of machinery, sir, it produces more and more products, and then it involves now machinery to bring about a new production processes, no? From manual labor to technological labor, which is actually correct, okay? Sige. Now, going back to our slides, let's talk about Industrial Revolution then. So by definition, it marked a period of development in later half of the 18th century that transformed largely rural agrarian societies in Europe and America into industrialized urban ones. Just like what you said, this is a rapid movement, no? Cultural or agrarian society into an industrialized society. This happened, it is because most of the development or discoveries were actually applied without limitations or without being barred from the society, especially with the church. No, wala gipungnan. All right. Now, goods that had once been painstakingly crafted by hand started to be produced in mass quantities by machines in factories. Fueled by the game-changing use of steam power, the Industrial Revolution began in Britain and spread to the rest of the world, which includes the United States by the 1830s and 40s. So again, machinery can only be powered, no? Nag-imbento ka usa ka makina to mass produce canned goods, all right? Now, this can only be powered if you have fuel. Now, prior to humans discovery on oil or petroleum, no, people were utilizing a different kind of fuel, right? Coal was the first to be highlighted as a fuel efficient for the factories in order to produce more and more products. Okay? Now, the question here is, sir, ngano man kinahanglan man mo produce og daghan nga produkto ang mga Europeans, sir? Sige daw. From the class. Ngano sir, kinahanglan mo transform from agrarian, sir, na mabuhi ra man ta sa pagtanom-tanom, kaon ginagmay. Pero ngano ni transform man ta into industries o ngano manginahanglan man ta og daghan, no, nga production. Sige, how about Andrew? Drew?
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Sige, Drew. Ngano man nang need man ang tao at that time to mass produce, no, products?
For me lang, sir, is that daghan naman ang mga society at that time na nag-need food o mga products, since na naman tay nahitabo na mga connections sa mga countries from different regions. Mo lang to, sir, ang ako ang idea, sir. Wala kay
Good idea. Now, aside from correct, no, with sa una pa manggid na namang intay connection from west to east, but at this moment also people or the powerful people in Europe started to compete to one another, no. This is the beginning where wars started to really highlighted in Europe, especially after the fall of Roman Empire, when they started to divide, all of those provinces, no, ng Roman Empire has established their own country, established their own political system. And that was the beginning also, that they keep on competing to one another, right? Now, at first glance, the main resource in order for them to gain power and wealth is the idea of mercantilism. No? They just go around, go to the places where they can accumulate wealth. But at the same time, it's not enough anymore that they just take away something from that place. They have to make their own. So that's why industries develop. The rich and the famous and the nobles and the kings and the queens at that time supported these industries to develop because they needed to. No, the more you have wealth, the more you have power. At the same time, industrialization coupled also with overpopulation. We see a growth spurt of the population at that time. It's because there are quite a lot of inventions, especially with technology and in the medical field. It gave people more extension with life because of the discoveries. Because knowledge was not suppressed, it's not limited anymore, that the church can only provide us the knowledge that we should have from medieval period. But in transition to Renaissance, Enlightenment period where industries has developed, no, or had developed, this gave people another avenue, another opportunity, no, to prosper and develop. All right. So again, now let's go back to our slides and let's continue. All right, so England is the birthplace of Industrial Revolution. Now, I did not include anything anymore. I just want to ask you, if you've read about it, how did England achieve Industrial Revolution? What were the major contributing factor that caused its massive advancement? And how did England's Industrial Revolution transform the entire Europe and other continents? So basically, ang England na naguna. But how did they achieve Industrial Revolution? That's the first question. Yun sa Manila pag-abot ng a point that from agrarian society, they evolve and develop to an industrial society. Sige, let's have Miss Medalia. Miss Medalia, can you hear me? Gubang speaker ni Miss Medalia. Okay. If you can have your answer now, just post your answer in our chat box. Again, ang pangutana is, yun sa man pagsugod sa England, why they are the first ever, no, in Europe to achieve Industrial Revolution. While waiting for Miss Medalia's answer, let's have so may nadari. Let's see. There are 18 people, so let's have Miss Guevero. Si Miss Guevero? Well, nagi dapat si Miss Guevero, no? Kaya naman na rin. Miss Guevero, can you hear me? Ayo. May tao sa tindahan. Miss Guevero. Sir, yes, Miss Guevero. What's up? The question is, yun sa man pag-start si England, no, to develop as an industrial power. Okay, let's move to Mr. Dejado. Again, sige, Miss Guevero, ha? Ang question is, yun sa man sa England, no? Pag-transform silang society from agrarian society to industrial society. Sila man daw ang nagsugod, no? Sa ilaha man nakita ang first evidence that England became the first industrial country. Yun sa Manila. Next will be Mr. Dejado. Sige, ibutang na lang, no? Di po daw function kay Mr. Deado. We have Cañete, because people in England is highly skilled, sir, and those skills are necessary for high technology to unfold. Okay, good. But why? Why they became so skilled? What pushes them? What are the factors that pushes these people to become very skilled and then eventually transform their society as an industrial power? You're correct, actually, no? But unsa man hinungdan ngano na push maning ang mga tao to become an industrial power, to be very skillful? Sige, isa pa may laing kahatalugan, sir. Okay, so that's the beginning, no? But manual ang labor nila when we talk about domestication. Of course, from agrarian, naghinahina sila transform because feudal system at this time is decline na, no? Especially ang mga feudal lords biya mga noble ko sila. Sa itong ipadala sa mga wars, mga holy wars. So nabilin kalaunan ang mga servants nila or katong mga nagtrabaho sa field. But eventually, yung hinay-hinay, daghan og naka-travel sa Asia, and then they were able to experience what are the glories of Asia. So pag-abot na ng mga information, niabot sa Europe, and they're able to transform feudal system into urban na system. So people from the fields transferred to the cities, no? And they established the urban place. And then by establishing this urban place, they were able to develop new skills that are needed by the people at that time. They don't need anymore the skills they have from the fields. No, napamagyapo ng trabaho sa fields because that's where we get the raw materials. But again, it started to develop from what are the need in that urban place or in that city. Okay, so what were the needed? Of course, nagpaduol sila sa port, no? Ang port na yung mga barko, na yung mga soldiers dito, na yung mga merchants that going back and forth from other places, especially going to Asia. What they do, or what they did at that time, is to check what are the needed material for these people. So they developed new skills na natay mga artisans, na natay mga klase-klase ng mga trabahante at that time. And out of curiosity, they were thinking, nidaghan na sa urban place, no? Nidaghan na ta. So what we're going to do is to create another thing that would help us get through with the basic problems in the society. Andrew added, no, since England known for textile production, the high demand for textile pushed them to produce more supply, correct? And happened that they made through innovations like flying shuttle, the spinning jenny, etc. to boost production. That is right, no? What pushes people are the need of that people. Sama pa silang giingon, no? The mother of all inventions is basically necessity. Panginahanglunon. So again, from feudal system, they transfer sila into cities. Cities became very urbanized. They're able to notice what are the basic needs of that urban population. And of course, textile culture man sila, no? Bato mga sanina. And they transformed it para na kanidaghan naman. So pag daghan, they have to find a new means, no, how to mass produce this kind of production. Ms. Medalia added, they achieved industrial revolutions through depending heavily on their colonies for raw materials. They also invented important inventions and improved their textile industry as well as the steam engine. Correct. This is now in continuation with what Andrew said, no? Ni Andrew, sir, naghina-hina yung sugod o industrialize ang mga British or ang mga English, sir. It's because na I need nila to produce more of the textile. Karon mas nidaghan pa ang production and they could not support anymore because these people who are working in the cities now or urban places are the farmers of the feudal system before. Nabiyaan naman itong mga farmland, gamay naman lang nag-farm anto, no? Basically lang ipang farm nila or just basic needs for them to eat, right? So this also pushes the British to find another means to get raw materials, and they started trying to find colonies na dayon, no? By means of colonies, they are subjugating people in that area, no? Getting all what they can in order to mass produce. And that's the beginning. But it added, no? Na dungagan pag yun with their discoveries of the use of steam engine fueled by coal. Okay? And that was the start. The other question was, or the next question, what were the major contributing factor that caused its massive advancement? Again, major contributing factor is that the necessity of the people at that time. It's for them to mass produce, since at that time textile man ang kinahanglan, so they produced more and more textile. But another contributing factor is that they were not able to produce enough, so they needed to find new means. And then when they explored the world, they were able to gain access to other production or other products that are needed in England. No, spices is the very very important discoveries that they have reached in Asia. It's because the use of spices will lengthen the products, especially those products na dali madaot. No? Itong mga edible products, and spices became one of the gold at that time. Diba? Anyways, in continuation, ang number 3 na question is, how did England's Industrial Revolution transform the entire Europe and other continents? Yun sa Manila. Just like what I said, now the invention of steam engines caused England to travel faster and to reach different places in Europe. Now, dili lang ang invention nila ng products ang gidala sa England, sa entire Europe, but also the idea that other European countries can also develop and industrialize. So when they have, of course, they have international connection with these countries within Europe. They are basically trading with one another. So going to other places like Germany, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, so on and so forth. So these are the countries also who paved the way to Industrial Revolution in Europe. But it was England who started it all. Their discovery of steam engine and their development also with telegraph helped these countries in Europe followed Industrial Revolution in England. Okay, so can you imagine one single invention out from necessity, no? Di man ka mupuhat o sa kabutang kung dili nimo panginahangluno na. Di ba? Maski pag for entertainment na siya ang butang, still you need it because it gives you happiness or satisfaction to yourself. So wala siguro yung masigo sa katao na mubuhat of something that does not have meaning to his life or her life. Di ba? So the European people did exactly what they wanted. No, they created steam engine because this is what they saw as one of the fastest production processes that they can do in order to mass produce their finished products out from the raw materials they got from their own fields or from the other countries on resource. Okay, so again, so these are the things, no, that Europe has contributed when we talk about Industrial Revolution. But it echoed to another continent. Dilit na lang ni siya sa Europe. Of course, Industrial Revolution's impact brought about a new definition of the loss of the seas. No? A new definition that whoever gets as much as lands overseas gets much wealth and power. And who were the first one to lead it? No, it was the European countries. Okay, well, of course, headed by Portugal, Spain, England, France, the Netherlands, Germany. So these are the first few of the countries who tried to explore beyond their own continent. And what happened was they were able to discover more and more and more lands in countries beyond the continent, right? They're able to reach Asia, though they've already had concept what Asia is because sa una, no, sa panahon sa crusade, they were able to reach Asia, even reach India, right? Aside from that, they also have the records from Marco Polo, who explored the Orient and was able to see the glory of the Han Dynasty. Sorry. Sa batong dynasty sa Nikuan, Kublai Khan. Basta kaya, ang dynasty ni Kublai Khan, no? That was the dynasty where si Marco Polo became the advisor ni Kublai Khan. Okay? All right, anyways, so that's the beginning. And they were able to reach not just Asia, but the New World. They called American continent as the New World. All right? And they were able to colonize it. And they were able to provide their own country an enough support in order for these industries to continue. Now, can you imagine if they didn't get any more raw materials? Their industries will fall definitely, and then they'll go back to zero, right? Kaya di naman sila gusto mubalik ka na nga sitwasyon because they've already transformed most of their places from agricultural land into industrial land. Di na nila ma-afford nga malugi sila, so they have to find a way. Okay? Sige. And that's what happened. Now that's the idea. Now it transformed the entire Europe, and even it goes beyond their own continent. Okay. Before we proceed to the next slide, which is the growth of nationalism, do you have any questions for Industrial Revolution? Or do you have something to say, no? In addition to our very general discussion. All right, if there's none, gamay-gamay na naman tayo na to, let's proceed. So the question is, what is nationalism? Yeah, let's talk about nationalism now. Mr. Galientes, what is nationalism? Mr. Galientes, are you on the line? Mr. Banluta.
Okay, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
For me, nationalism, it is someone's interest in maintaining the sovereignty of one nation. For example, the nationalism of the Filipinos, we want to maintain our identity as being Filipino, despite the mentality that the American has given to us. That's my opinion about nationalism.
Okay, sige. How about Mr. Dampor? What is nationalism for you? Mr. Dampor? Are you on the line? Oh, ghosting, Mr. Dampor. Sige, let's have Miss Calamba. What is nationalism for you? Wala po. Amor. Si Amor na lang. Ito ang, what is nationalism for you, Amor? Sir, can I reply to oh, sige, you can. Sige. Let's have Bricks. Bricks, what is nationalism for you, Bricks?
Good morning, sir. Good morning, classmates.
Good morning.
So for me, sir, nationalism is actually it's just the same as what Mr. Jen Banluta. It is something like pursuing the interest of the nation and embracing what you have. I'll just add na lang na it is something. Nationalism is doing things that will protect or that will kanang mapatigbabaw kung unsa ang kaayuhan sa sulod sa mga katawhan ana nga sa ato ang nation og para maprotektahan laban sa mga detrimental nga mga effects or mga kaning nga ginadala sa lain nga mga nasod kontra sa ato ang nasod, sir. Thank you.
Okay, right. So all of the definitions now are actually correct. They are part of how we explain and how we define nationalism. Okay. Furthermore, nationalism for me is supporting and protecting the country. Correct. It is working hard in order to improve the needs and lives of the people. That is right. So yeah. Now let's move on to the next slide now. So by definition, nationalism is an ideology based on the premise that individuals' loyalty and devotion to the nation surpass other individual or group of interest. So basically, it's your love for this country. Love more than your spouse, more than your siblings, more than your parents, more than anybody else. This is the love for your country, okay, or your nation, okay. Now, European nationalism started in modern sense, no? It was born out of desire of the community to assert its unity and independence. In the 19th century, they began to determine the struggle to realize nationalist aspiration. So basically, yun sa nahitabo sa Europe sa una. This is now after the fall of Roman Empire, ha? Of course, sa fall ng Roman Empire, na tayong mga makita, no, nga evidences that these people are yearning for a nationalistic view, but they can't have its idea of nationalism if your country or your state is still under an empire, di ba? But during the fall of Roman Empire, here comes independent states, no? Some of the regions that has been part by or have been part by the great empire was given an opportunity to become an independent state. Tumoto na yung mga breakaway, no? So, dito ang England, dito ang France, ang Italy, ang Germany, so on and so forth. So these are actually some of the European na mga regions na nahimong part sa una sa Roman Empire. Now, after they've developed their own nation, they've developed their own political system, but they are under the impression of a minor imperial ruler, which is actually the king and the queen or the monarch, no? But the monarch still has the power, no? An authoritative power where it subjugates all the people. And the people under a monarchy gets a very limited expression of freedom. And the oppression that they have experienced and all of the atrocities that they experienced has led to a simple rebellion, to a revolution, no? And this revolution speaks to what we know now as the mura siya og kanang ganing spark for nationalistic views, no? Especially European nationalism started in France, right? Because there was this revolution that helped Francis get its liberation from the monarch at that time. So let's move on to the next slide now. So again, what was the role of France in European nationalism? Just like what I said, it started in France. But what was the role of France in European nationalism? Before we do so, what happened man diay in France, no? And why nagsugod sa ilaha ang sense of nationalism? What is the history behind it? Sige. Okay lang. Okay lang kung nilikaten sila Mr. Rojas. Hindi lang ito kanina. It's okay for Amor. Sabagin na nila construct. Anyways, going back to the question. What happened in France at that time? Why? There was a revolution, no? And this revolution has led to free the people from the oppression. Sige, anybody from the class, you can share, you know, your own understanding from what happened in that history. Itong mga nakabasa na. Or if dili man mo katubag, no, i-type na lang inyong answer. But mas may naalig to. Miss Mangas. Si Miss Mangas. Naagin si Miss Mangas. Kaya naman dito online. Sige, Miss Mangas. What do you know about the history of France and why it led to a revolution that's very popular na revolution, and it started, no, the idea of nationalism. Wala? Wala ganahan mo share? Alright, anyway, so what happened in France is basically the same thing with what's happening in the entire Europe at that time. No, they are under a monarchy, and since they are under the monarchy of France, everybody's subject by the king and the queen. But of course, there are a lot of unrest, especially in France at that time under King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, if I get the timeline correctly, but prior to their reign, there are a lot of atrocities, a lot of inequalities. It's because they don't and they can't have an opportunity not to air out something. Yes, pwede ramis manggasitai, no? To air out something what's happening in their society at that time, right? Even their scholars, they're the brightest of the brightest, still subject to the king and the queen. Okay. Now, what happened is there's unrest in France, especially with what's happening. Most of the resources in France is being used going to wars, especially with England. No, that's like 100 years of war between France and England. So most of the resources is napadulong sa military because of their ambition to defeat one another. So the French people started to get unrest of what's happening. Why can't they have peace, and why can't they have a better political system that would emphasize and give value to the French people? So then, ang mga naa sa office po, no, supported some of the people na dili naman ni maayo ang ilang ipangbuhat. And then when the monarchy lavishly, open their palace for parties, makita na dito, grabe kabuhong kayo, while the rest of the society or the people in the society naglisod, no? Yes, tungod sa American Revolution, sir, nga dako gasto, ilang mga naabot na lang ko og bankrupt. Yeah, no? Now, so this unrest affected the entire French society. Kita nila nga dili man effective ang monarch, or ang monarchy to rule us. And then nakita nila nga grabe kadako kaya ang disparity between the rich and the poor. So they developed this sense of mass nationalism, no? Kadtong mga nagkumpul-kumpul nga masses mo to sila ang nagprotest against the French government. And then they were able to successfully defeat the king's guards, and then they were able to ouster, actually, beheaded the king and the queen at that time. And then they actually still beheaded all the followers of the king and the queen, especially the nobles. Right? So what they installed now are some of the political leaders at that time. But yet, na problem, no? Kani nga mga political leaders, dili sila ingana kamaayo in handling the entire French society. Siguro because it's there's a transition from monarchy to republic. So representation sa tao is dili pa kaayo ingon ana ka accepted sa tibuok society. Murag nagkuan pa sila, naglibog pa sila into balancing. All right? Here comes then Napoleon Bonaparte. So among all of the political leaders dito, there's this soldier, general, who actually stood out and then began establishing his own dominion. So yung what he defeated all of those nobles who would try to rule France, and then he established himself, as a monarch. So Napoleon Bonaparte na nahimo man siyang monarch, tapos dili man gusto ang mga European, ang mga French people na sa ka monarch, pero yung kaugalingon niya mag-establish as a monarch itself. Now, mo nang nakanindot sa nahitabo sa life and contribution ni Napoleon Bonaparte sa French Revolution, and again sa establishment ng French Republic. It is because though more conflicting idea, he established himself as a monarch, as an emperor, but he promotes liberty, justice, and equality. Muna yang gi-promote. So eventually, nadawat sa mga tao, naatay ruler, but we are treated differently. Meaning to say, we are given much of liberty, much equality, in a sense, and then justice, right? So these are the qualities na nakita nila kay Napoleon. Though monarch siya, emperor siya. Pero, nasiyay kanang pagtanaw sa tao. It's because by nature, dili mo gina siya royalty, di ba? He's a general of a of the government before he became the ruler. But he has this kind of a political will to change the mindset of the people. Kung imo kong pangutanon, sakto ra sad to, no? Because they are in transition, they can't handle it yet. Okay? Ang transition period from monarchy to a direct representative from the people. So they have to accept Napoleon as if a transition period. But it took a while, no, transition period ng Napoleonic era. At ni-appeal pa na sa Napoleon III, taman. Alright? For Ms. Mangas, in my own understanding, so the French Revolution is known for the inequality that the people experienced. Yes, as the I mentioned, no? And by the citizens who were able to carry the revolution, not the ideals of Napoleon, especially about inequality and nationalism, were able to spread ideas about liberty, equality, the spirit of nationalism across different nations. Yes, nga namang na-spread out man siya because Napoleon started also to occupy other places in Europe. So ihan nasakop ang mga laing-laing lugar sa Europe, no, sa Napoleonic era. And then sa pagsakop niya, wala niya gibago ang iyang treatment from what he had treated sa mga French people, no? So iya gyapon gi-promote liberty, equality, and then the sense of nationalism until such time, no, moral na himong double-edged sword ba, no? Gusto ni Napoleon niya yung sakupo ng tanan, pero gituduan po niya how to become free and how to exercise liberty. So nahitabo, these are countries with different set of cultural values, di ba? French man ka, lahi ka paniniwala. English man ka, lahi ka paniniwala. But you are under the French Empire. So sa ibuhaton sa mga English, sa mga German, sa mga Irish, sa mga Scottish, they would eventually find a way to get away from this new colonial master. So eventually, hinahinay nag-revolt ra pud ning mga gipangsakop ni Napoleon. At such time, napildi siya sa Battle of Waterloo, the last battle ni Napoleon. Okay? So muna nahitabo, but daw mo rin yung blessing in disguise, no? Masipag imperial pod kaayo ang motive ni Napoleon, but blessing in disguise because he promotes this kind of liberal ideas or liberal thinking, which freed most of Europe at that time. Okay? Sige. So, ano to siya, no? So, that was the start on how European countries fosters its nationalism. On the other hand, by the way, napuntay ko idea that there are two phases of nationalism. It's actually offensive and defensive kind of nationalism. After some times, more and more countries in European nation fosters nationalism since they really love their country, they wanted to protect it. But by protecting it, they are also occupying other territories. And aside from occupying other territories, they are also subjugating the lives of the natives of that area. So it's very offensive in a manner because nang occupy man sila, no? But they wanted to foster nationalistic values in their own country, and that also leads to Eurocentric idea, di ba? Na sila they really love their country, but since ilahang nakita ang uban yung pwede ram din sila matamak-tamakan, then Eurocentric ideals became very known na sila ang dapat masunod because they are the first one as they wanted to believe to develop. Okay? And the other one is defensive. Katong mga ipang subjugate niya. Just like the Philippines, no? Ang atong sense of nationalism at that time during Spanish colonization, the American invasion, and the Japanese invasion is basically very defensive. In a way that we are trying to liberate ourselves from our oppressors, from our colonial masters. Right? But ang uban, lahi ang ilahan, especially superpowers, their sense of nationalism is very offensive in a manner. Okay? Sige, almost done. Let's talk about the birth of Romanticism and Realism in the Western world. So, can somebody please tell me and differentiate what is Romanticism and Realism in the West? Now, we are not really just talking about art and literature at this time, no? But This is basically the entire society and what is romantic ideals and realist ideals. Sige daw. May I ask one of you here? Any volunteers? What is Romanticism and realism in the Western world during this time? Hello, napat ko yung mga estudyante. You can also place your answers sa akong pangutana. But I'd like to ask one of you here, maybe a volunteer, no? Gusto mo ng romanticism? Gusto mo ng realism na time? Just your own understanding from what I gave you sa module, or if you have further readings, no? Wala. Hindi mo, tawag na ako pangalan. Miss Medalia. Can I have Miss Medalia on the floor and give us your thoughts about Romanticism and realism? Aside from Miss Medalia, Bricks, do you have anything to say? All right, anyways, let me just differentiate for you, all right? So Romanticism ideals versus realism ideals. Romanticism ideals is basically the idea of love for the country or nationalism, liberty, and justice and equality. So kaning mga ideals, matawag natin as romantic ideals, which existed in the West at that time. This is during the height of the people who wanted to be free from oppression from their own government, or from the oppression atrocities of the monarchy. Okay? Now, if you've noticed, most of the literature and arts at this time represents ideals of freedom. Okay, are you familiar with liberty leading people? Katong babae gani nga naghawid sa French flag.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that is an idea of romantic art, which represents the situation of the masses at that time, or the situation of the society at that time. So there are quite a lot of authors, of artists, of scholars, no, in mga scientists who revolutionize the ideals na na-experience sa West at that time, and that is Romanticism. It's their involvement on how to be free, and their sense of nationalism, that they would like to fight and die in order to help and free the entire populace, in this example, of the French people. Okay. Now, on the other hand, realism of the West is actually right after Romanticism. This is where monarchy is not as powerful as before, and then there is already a good representation of the people in the government through representatives, no? Because they're exercising now Republican government. So in a realistic manner, pag human sa Romanticism, pag human itong mga revolutions nila, pag human itong i-evoke nila ang ilahang right to be as equal as anybody, nakita dahil dito ang problem na po sa realism. No? Poverty, problems with health, problems with the laws, problems again with the struggle between the rich and the poor. So realism na siya, no? Realistic, and in a manner, unsay mga nasulat dito sa literature, unsay mga paint dito, it's very reflective So unsay nakita sa mga tao at that time, no? So nakita ninyo ang difference. Romantic gani or romantic ideals, this is the time where ang atuang mind supersedes to what is being presented sa atuang kuano, sa atuang mga kaugalingon. And dili na atong mga kaugalingon lang ato ang mga ipanghuna-huna or atong gusto i-save, but everybody, no, in our society, we would like to save it, right? But in realism, mo na siya pagkahuman sa Romanticism. This is where we see the real scenario. Now, after we fought hard, nakita na to ang after effect. Okay. Another question here is, what are the themes expressed in the period of Romanticism and Realism? So, mo na itong ipangsulti, no? For Romanticism, liberty, justice, equality, nationalism. For realism, so these are the things that are effects of what has been done in the time of romantic ideals. So, makita natin poverty, still inequalities, no, between the rich and the poor, the gap between the rich and the poor, government failures, mga medical advancement, or uban pa nga mga achievements sa humans. Okay? So, mana siyang common themes. Now, let's have it parallelism. No? Let's parallel the ideals of romantic and realist. In the Philippines, did our country reach the stage of romanticism and realism? Cite an example. Okay. Balik ko na. You've already have a glimpse of what is romanticism and what is realism. But let's talk about its parallel view, no? Ang ato bang country, the Philippines, did we reach romantic period and realistic period? Before you answer, no, let me just read one here. Romanticism focuses on subjective experiences of the people, like hopes, yes, correct, institution, desires, and dreams, and it emphasizes individualism, while realism portrayed common, ordinary people and their situations of the society, around the society. That is right. That is right. Okay. Also, no, so Romanticism, it most likely reflects those heroes in the revolution, or those prominent people in the government, and the kings and the monarchs, no, the way they dressed, the way they presented themselves to the public. All right? So manang daghan pud may makita sa romantic value gani, grabe kayo ang words na gipanggamit nila. Well, sa realism, is like what I said, no? It's the truth about what's happening in the society. Now, going back to the discussion in parallelism, unsa man, I mean, did we have the period of romanticism and realism in the Philippines? If we do have, or we did have, can you provide a specific example? Hello, Nai. Ganahan mo share sa pangutana and give us an answer. Mr. Benluta, do you have anything to say?
Wala, sir.
Okay. How about Miss Alojado? Okay, now to give you an example, we did have the same romantic period with other European countries or other Western countries or even other Asian countries. In our time, this is actually the time of the revolution in the Philippines under Spanish colonization. Yes, Ms. Juarez is correct, right? After which, we did have American period, still a romantic period where we wanted to free ourselves and gain our liberty, and the Japanese era, right? Afterwards of this period of trying to prevent further destructions of this country, right? Realism move on. So na free na ta, no? We're able to express ourselves, our devotions, our love to this country, no? From the time of Rizal, or prior to the time of Rizal, to the time of Luna, until to the time of the people who fought hard with the Japanese period. A realistic manner where we see some of the issues concerning the Philippines then, right? From the very start that we were able to get free from the American period, we're able to challenge how do we save the Philippines from the previous destruction, and how do we move forward? Okay, so after the Commonwealth period, we're able to establish the First Republic and the Rojas. No? After that, we started trying to develop our country, but there are a lot of things that we have seen realistically. And what are these? These are actually problems in poverty, no? Problems in the distribution of lands, problems in our political system, the problems in our educational system, the problems on our economy, because we're still rebuilding at that time. Until to the very present period, we constantly check the realism in our society. Okay, we've already been through with the Romantic period, and that's a good period, no? Where people, the entire Philippines, have fought hard in order to achieve our freedom. Have really loved our country because our heroes at that time, and the masses who joined our heroes at that time, fought hard, you know, for us to be liberated and for us to experience the freedom that we are experiencing right now. But in realism, it talks about now the lives of an individual, the lives of the people who are constantly being challenged with issues concerning in our society. Okay, and of course, if you talk about what are the products, if we talk about Romanticism, at that time, we have the arts of Luna, we have the literature of Rizal, so on and so forth, right? Mabitaw tong grabe kayo ang influence ng Rizal sa Katipunan, led by Bonifacio. It's because what he has written in Noli and Ilfili is a very romantic na expression ng romantic ideals, right? That it needed to be liberated from its own oppressor. Mona, si Rizal was hunted down by the Spanish colonial government in the Philippines. It's because of his bold na expression towards his own experiences, which is written and published in the literature. For Andrew, for me, the realism period in the Philippines started when we achieved independence from the colonizers until today. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, after Ginana, after the romantic ideals, after we fought hard, after we achieved our freedom, realism started. It is where we see what is happening in our society. Okay? All right, so that would be the end of our lesson. We still have another slide for an open forum. If you have anything to say or anything to add, you can actually do that now before we close our session this morning. Naa pa mo'y ipangdungan for open forum? Type 1 if wala. Okay, sige. I will see you 1:30 for our Asian studies. All right. Thank you for attending our online sync for